Hey, Deliberate Leaders. I am your host, Allison Dunn, founder of the Deliberate Leaders podcast, where we are dedicated to helping leaders build strong, thriving businesses. Each episode is focused on featuring inspiring interviews to help you on your leadership journey. And today's guest is no different. I am so thrilled to be bringing you Craig Ross, who is the CEO of a leadership training company by the name of Verus Global. He is the co-author of Do Big Things, the simple steps teams can take to mobilize hearts and minds and make an epic impact. That is no small title and no small task. Craig, thank you so much for joining us on Deliberate Leaders today.
Allie, thank you for having me. I'm excited to join you.
Yeah, we're glad to have you. And I understand that you're joining us here from Colorado, Denver area. So I love the Aspen photo picture behind you. I'm hoping we can divert for just a moment and get this kicked off with a brief, deliberate conversation about leadership, which obviously you are also an expert in. So what would be your number one leadership tip that you would give my listeners?
Number one leadership tip, I would go with the idea that leading others is a function of course, influencing others, and that influence is earned. I think all too often in our fast-paced, volatile, uncertain world, that we tend to rely on credentials, authority by position, and so forth. Yet the leaders that research shows that we follow the most, follow the best, and do big things with, are those leaders that earn the right to influence us. And that's a skill, it's a talent that most of us dedicate. It takes a lifetime to practice and to gain the discipline in. So I guess I'd start there.
Yeah, that's a good tip, and it's a lot of things that we think about as to how to have the right type of influence as leaders, right? As opposed to positional. Good, thank you very much. You use a term, DSD, and so I'm just going to tee that up. So you say that many teams feel that they're operating normally, but in reality, they suffer from DSD. So can you tell us a little bit about that and what causes this?
Yeah, even more so today. We're talking about being distracted, overly stressed, and of course, disconnected. And those three together are lethal. They create toxicity, both at an individual level and also a collective level. And so we just did a huddle with several of our folks in our network. And on average, most of them are on 4 or 5, 6 different teams, project teams, work teams, committees, so on and so forth. And the ability to maintain focus on what matters most, the ability to ensure that we're processing all the data, all that's expected of us, and the ability to stay connected to what matters most, our values, our purpose as individuals, as organizations. Those things are fundamental to our ability to do big things. And so unless I am conscious and purposeful as a leader in addressing those 3 areas for those I'm leading, we'll likely suffer from DSD.
What are some of the things that you suggest that teams can do to maintain that focus and avoid the stress and stay connected?
Even more than ever now, again, with the volatility that we're facing in today's world, it's really important that we're purposeful. And purposeful at the very beginning. For example, Allie, you started off our time together by asking for a leadership tip. Very clear right from the very beginning. Anybody who's listening is going to get immediate value. We're recommending to our global leaders that they actually start their meetings with a question that aligns people to the focus that is their imperative for that meeting. And it's not just the traditional, what do we have to get done by the end of this call? It's really, why is it important that we accomplish this for the business? Why is it essential that we deliver this aspect of our mission? So whatever the instincts of the leader inform them, being purposeful in guiding focus through questions is a way to address DSD.
I love the fact that you picked up on the question being like asking the question first, because I think if we can all get quick clarity as to why we even call a meeting together and get focused around that like immediately, as opposed to going like, what are we doing here? What are we trying to figure out, right?
And all too often, I'm culpable of this. We assume everybody
Me too.
knows. I sent out the meeting agenda. I sent out in the calendar invite, it was there. We automatically assume, but everyone's moving at 100 miles an hour. So that being purposeful is really critical.
So let's talk about team communications. Does that sound good? All
Yeah.
right. How important is it to a team success when one, hiring the right people and replacing the wrong people versus communicating effectively with people you have who exist on your team?
Yeah, so I think oftentimes communications break down because again, if we go to leadership by authority or positional leadership, we automatically think because I'm saying it, people understand it. I like to think about a leader once told me, we tend to think in Monet. Monet, of course, the impressionist, right? The path in the garden. We can see it. It's not still life, but we can generally see this impression. Well, when leaders speak, we speak in Monet, but people hear in Kandinsky. They hear in abstract. And that creates the DSD. And so what really becomes, I'm going to come back to your point around the need to ask what we call co-discover questions. So I'm being deliberate in my communications. I love your name, deliberate. We're going to be deliberate, and being deliberate by co-discovering through questions. So we're creating a shared reality. And so when you talk about people joining a team, leaving a team, those types of communications or asking co-discover questions becomes really critical.
Can you give my listeners an example of co-discovery?
You got it. Well, let's start with what co-discovery is not. Remember when we were selling, well, I'm going to age myself here. There used to be Grit newspaper. We all had our little sales projects as we were growing up. Remember, and they told us whenever you're doing sales, you only ask questions that you know the answer to. I also have a few friends who are attorneys, and they definitely only ask questions that they know the answer to. Well, that's not leadership. If I'm asking questions that I know the answer to, that's manipulation. And so we really advocate, say what's important, say why it's important, but then that co-discover question around, I want to leverage the diversity on our team. I want to understand and bring out the best in you and mobilize your heart and mind by asking a question such as, what do you believe are the first priorities for us in moving this forward? Or why will this benefit our community from your perspective? And so those are co-discover questions that build on what's important and why. So now we're executing together.
Yeah, that's a great example and a great communication tip. Yeah, I love that. You say that one of the most important discussions someone on a team will make is whether, or I guess it's decision is really what I meant to say. So one of the most important decisions a team member will make is whether to bring their best. Mm-hmm. And that's something that we should ponder about. So tell me what you mean by that.
Yeah, we break it down to, of course, the name of the book, three do big things. So there's actually 3 do big things decisions. And it's so fascinating to me because we know these, yet a lot of us forget. And again, I'll only speak for myself, but the research out there, when you think about Daniel Goleman and others that study emotional intelligence, we forget that this is a choice. And the first one's what we call the contributor decision. I choose to bring my best to this interaction. That's a choice. And of course, and again, this uncertain, volatile world we're in, sometimes we get an autopilot and we forget that choice. So one of the things that we can do as deliberate leaders is we can call and build awareness within our team and say, hey, what does it look like for us to choose in this difficult situation with this customer to bring our best? And what does that look like? The other 2 decisions very quickly, the other one's the activator decision. I choose to bring out your best. Hallie, you did that very clearly before we even started this podcast. You were asking me questions, honoring who I am, showing a sincere interest in me. You were choosing to bring out my best. That's the activator decision. The third decision is the connector decision. We choose to partner together. And all one has to do is watch world politics and notice when those decisions aren't being made and when they are. And as teams who are going to be deliberate and succeeding, the connector decision becomes really critical. All three of them do.
Mhm. As we all know, not all leadership functions well. So there's some dysfunction that happens, and we see it every day. I'm sure you do as well. What are some of the common barriers to fixing teams' effectiveness or reducing their dysfunction?
One of the most common, so the barriers is one of the important steps in our 7 do big things, the 7 steps in the do big things framework. And the barriers that we're talking about, we're noticing in our research, 25 years working around the world, that oftentimes teams will focus on external barriers. Like right now, of course, with the COVID pandemic, a lot of, our economy is obviously under duress. Yet the most important barriers that we must address as a team are the barriers that we can control, the internal barriers. Our brain is actually constantly, to protect ourselves individually, it's actually constantly creating barriers between us. The biases that I have for different types of people. One of those biases is the affinity bias. You look like me, you talk like me, you're from the same part of the world as me, you're in the same function as I am. Hey, we're both finance people. Hey, we're not both finance people, so you don't get my world. I mean, the list goes on and on. So to answer your question, really encourage teams, leaders to be deliberate in addressing those biases that can, if we're not mindful, will inadvertently build barriers in our effectiveness to work together.
Do you have any tips on how someone can recognize that may be the challenge that they're facing in a communication or, making the team less effective?
You got it. Number one is just being mindful of my emotional state. When I'm moving to frustration, when I'm moving to, actually with some of the leaders we support, when I'm getting too passionate and excited, I am more likely
That's me.
You and I both.
Yeah.
But we've learned some hard lessons, haven't we? Because we miss important data when we get too passionate and too excited. So it's whenever we lose control of our emotional state. Now, we are emotional beings, and was it Daniel Goleman says 91%, up to 91% of the decisions we make when we're interacting with each other are based on how we feel about people. And so to deny that isn't smart. To recognize it is what's important. And so that would be my answer to your question is, let's just be mindful of our emotional state so we can do a better job of functioning from a shared reality and seeing the same data together.
I assume that you're saying this, but I think it's worth pointing out just because that aware of my emotional state. So I have the opportunity, and then also who we're speaking to, right? So to be like, oh, wait a minute, you're getting, too emotional. Like there's, something, we need to get it back on track and figure out that we're hearing each other and that we're both communicating. So it's totally a two-way street, which is an obvious thing to state, but I can only control mine, but I have to observe yours. So I have a role in both.
I love that. I love it. It's step number 6 in our 7 steps. It's called Energizer on a Shared Reality. It's a simple tool called the Energy Map. May I share it, Allie?
Please, that would be amazing. Yes.
So the energy map is really, it's based upon understanding that whatever I focus on, I'm going to see more of. That, of course, is well known. And then, of course, whatever I focus on and go towards, I actually start to, that's how I create beliefs, and the beliefs drive my emotions. And so the energy map is basically broken into 3 parts. There's the backside of the energy map, which is my emotional state of upset. The middle is neutral. It's Shakespeare. Nothing is good or bad, but thinking makes it so. It's just data. And then the front side of the energy map is when I'm enthusiastic, I'm moving forward. It's the feel-good emotions. Well, as human beings, we're all over that map. The key to teams that are effective, that do big things, is a leader's ability to recognize where people are on that map. And therefore, to your point, if I'm sensing you're frustrated with a customer, I can actually say, tell me more about why you're frustrated, backside of the energy map. As a human being and a professional, once you feel heard, where do most of us go? We go to the middle of the energy map, once I get that off my chest. Right. But as you know, all too many leaders, they want to deny teammates, those they lead, those emotions, and just say, get over it. Let's move forward. Let's solve this problem. And that's an impossible task for a human being.
Right. Which that is almost an eloquent essence of why coaching is so important.
Huge.
There's certain team settings or environments where we can't express what is holding us back as a human or as a leader and in our thinking, and we're on the wrong side of the energy map. And coaching gives you an opportunity to express that and have permission to ask that tough question of, well, tell me why you're feeling that way. Yeah.
Love that. And then when I tie it to your mission and being deliberate, the understanding that creating abundance. And when I'm on that backside of the energy map, I'm thinking scarcity. I'm fearful. And again, it's not wrong to feel that way. It's what we do through coaching. I love your connection there. Absolutely. Through the coaching, through the support, creating the experience of abundance so I can lead from that space.
Yeah, fantastic. Do you have any advice for someone on a team that recognizes that the company's official leadership is preventing the team from accomplishing the objectives? You've never seen this before, right?
Yeah, that's a big one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Advice. If I were to, well, there's a lot. One of the things I think is really critical. Again, I apologize. I know who I'm working with here. So being deliberate.
I love it.
I said, okay.
Yeah.
Being really deliberate around where are we autonomous and what is under our control. And so my recommendation is when we find ourselves being victim to the leadership of our organization, as a leader, my temptation might be, I might be compelled to say, hey, get over it, be a professional. Well, that's not going to work. What's going to work is if I allow people to process, coach them, and say, tell me why it's frustrating, and then follow that up with, and so where are we empowered? Where can we be accountable? What's under our control? And then, of course, guide focus that way.
Right. Yeah. Great advice. What do you think are the most common mistakes that companies make when developing or not developing leaders?
I think one of the biggest mistakes is they separate it from business performance. Oftentimes we see this, culture initiatives and leadership development initiatives fail because they're culture and leadership development initiatives. At the end of the day, I as a leader have to hit a number, and I'm held accountable for that number. My performance is going to be assessed on that number. And so along come some people and say, hey, let's develop our leaders, or let's develop our culture. Well, no one's going to raise their hand and say, no, that's stupid. I'd be a heretic. I have to raise my hand and say, count me in, because we all know how important it is. Yet at the end of the day, where am I going to spend my energies? I'm going to spend it on hitting my number. So our recommendations to our clients is use a method that allows us to develop leaders in the context of hitting that number. Let's develop our culture in the context as your strategy to hit the number. Now I'm all ears, because now, wait a minute, you're going to help me hit my number, and you're going to do it by developing my leaders, and it's consistent. I'm all in.
I stay very business focused on everything that I do, although my heart's all about leadership development and building culture and engagement. But none of it makes any difference if you're not actually helping the organization succeed forward, right? To achieve its own level of excellence, whatever they decide that is. So,
yeah, well put.
On the concept of fostering trust and collaboration, do you have any advice on how to be the team leader that team members want to have meetings with? They want to be on your team. They want to be on your project.
Yeah, fabulous and important question, because a lot of people, my generation, and let's just say I have less time in front of the horse than I do behind it. We grew up thinking trust was in the business place was essentially about being credible and consistent. If you were those two things, people would trust you. Well, times are changing. And more, in addition to being credible and being consistent, it's about being humanly connected. And everyone's aware of the research that's out there. We have more digital platforms to connect on as human beings, yet people have never felt so alone. depression's up, suicide's up. We see that. And why is that? Because digital does not replace the human connection. It provides a platform for it. At the end of the day, then my answer to your question is, as human beings, as leaders, we have to be. Well, a good friend of mine, he's the CEO for Tillamook. Tillamook is a co-op of farmers that world-class dairy out in the West Coast.
Best cheese ever.
Best cheese ever, yes. They're working their way east, and if you can get their ice cream, consider yourself lucky.
Actually, it's best ice cream ever. Yeah. I agree. I'm a their peppermint mint chocolate.
Yes, that's it. Patrick Kreitzer is a dear friend, and he's a perfect example of what's necessary to create trust. And what he does is, yes, he's credible, yes, he's consistent. But when you listen to his town hall meetings, as an example, he's personable. He's telling stories where he's vulnerable. He's sharing his fears. He's sharing his concerns. Another leader, very similar to Patrick, I was just on a call with him, and he was in front of his whole organization, and someone asked him a question. He said, "You know what? I haven't thought of that yet." Stop the press. Instantly. Now, there will be some people say, he hasn't thought about it yet, he's not credible. Well, most of us are saying, you know what, thanks for being real. Mm-hmm. Thanks for being human. Because his next statement was, I'm glad you brought it up, because we are now going to think about it, and I'll follow up with you on what we're going to recommend for action items. So my answer, long-winded, I apologize. The third item is connect as humans is just as important as being credible.
Yeah. That's a great example, because someone might say, well, that's not inspiring your team, but if I contributed something from the audience to the person I'm looking to lead us, I would want to know that there's a win-win in that for sure. Every day. Every
day. By the way, most of us, our own hearts are mobilized. When I can be more authentic, I become more mobilized myself, and it creates fabulous synergies.
Absolutely. Yeah. What are the steps that you can take to make sure I'm asking this correctly?
No problem.
Steps you can take as a leader or a team member to grow trusting and collaborative relationships among team members? That's a complicated question.
It is. You want me to roll with it?
Yeah.
I think I apologize to come back as a broken record, but the collaborative relationships are really going to be built upon certain capabilities, interpersonal capabilities. And those are skills. Those are skills just like technical skills need to be developed. And so the skill and the ability to bring my best, even when there's conflict, is really, really important. The ability to bring out your best, even though I don't agree with you, even though you're from a different function, even though you haven't worked here as long as I have, so on and so forth, is a skill. And then the ability to partner together, to find shared objectives, to find shared motivations, what we do have in common. We can see it in our world today. People are struggling to do that. And so we like to say aligned teams are led by collaborative leaders. There's just no doubt about it. And it's a skill worth developing.
So I love that. I want you to say that quote again, because I think that's a really important one. You said teams that are aligned.
Yeah, aligned teams are led by collaborative leaders.
Aligned teams are led by collaborative leaders, because collaboration means that you're working what's important to me and what's important to you, and together. Oh, I like that a lot. I'm going to have to, I'd like to use that in that I'm working on right now, if that is okay.
You got it. Feel free. And one of the things I'll give you a little tip.
Yeah.
Lots of people, they struggle with collaboration. So it's really worth asking our teams deliberately, what is collaboration? And what's really important is collaboration is not consensus. Mm-mm. Collaboration is not agreement. Collaboration means that we're actually doing those. We're optimizing our collective talent. It means we're going beyond processes, structure, role clarity, and we're actually optimizing the collective talents that we have. And so it's worth, as a collaborative leader, we encourage our leaders to make sure that you're asking your team and creating that definition, a shared definition in advance.
That is a brilliant exercise to go through, because I'm sure it's not the same thing amongst everyone. So creating that. So do big things. It's talking about bringing your best. So I love the concept of bringing your best versus being perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yes.
You talked about the 7 steps. Have we missed? Can you do like a high level overview of kind of the 7 steps? Is that possible?
Yeah, you got it. Real quick, real easy, and I'm going to share. We didn't sit in a room and just make these up. This is 25 years of working. I don't know what it is, like 34 different industries, all the continents except for the poles. I mean, it's been a lot of work, and we're continuing to evolve it. The first one is commit to the human imperative. It's committing to an understanding that who we are as people is going to make a difference in the business, our ability to deliver the business imperative. And commit means actually invest in it, right? So step number 1 is commit to the human imperative. Step number 2 is embody success and leverage failure. All too often, organizations, leaders will create cultures, microcultures, or lead where they're fear-based. And we actually don't even know what it means to be a success. Lots of inspiring stories. A friend of mine's a former astronaut, as an example. When you walk in and you meet his team, it doesn't matter what the crisis is. There's a confidence about them because they have a processed way to develop themselves to overcome obstacles. The third one is the 3 do big things decisions. And so that's the contributor decision. I'm going to choose to bring my best, the activator decision, bring out the best in others, and the connector decision. We see teams do big things when they're making those conscious choices. 4th step is, of course, breaking the barriers. And again, I want to remind everyone that those are oftentimes default. We think external. It's the internal barriers in our thinking. What am I on? 5th step? 5th step is focusing on what matters. Focus, focus, focus. As Daniel Goleman says, it's the seed of our actions. And so because it gives birth to our thoughts and so forth, most people know that. Far too few are deliberate. 6th step is energizing around a shared reality. It's impossible to collaborate effectively if we're functioning from different realities. That's really, really critical. And then the 7th step is mobilizing hearts and minds. We've worked with some organizations that they have a shared reality, but they're actually not doing anything with it. And so we must be mobilizing not just our hands, but our hearts and our minds, and those that do, of course, accomplish big things.
Have a client example or a company example of that have worked really well through the 6 steps, and what's the demonstration of the 7th step?
Yeah, you got it. We work with a client right now. Actually, this client's based in Europe, and because of the pandemic that we're moving through, of course, they're seeing a certain segment of their customer base that is, of course, just all of a sudden gone or on pause. And so in that particular case, it's an understanding of the importance of how they're interacting with each other. So that's the human imperative of valuing everybody. What does that mean to take care of one, to actually truly care? Are they leveraging the failures to ensure that they're embodying success now as they move through that? And rather than boring and going through all those, I'll really focus on energizing around a shared reality.
Okay.
What's really critical is that the data that they're seeing right now and being autonomous of the data and asking themselves the questions of what's the best we could do right now. And this leader actually just shared this. If we were to fail, it won't be because of COVID. It'll actually be because of our inability to be agile. And I thought that was really profound. And so they've got the agile systems and processes, but they're wanting to be more agile as humans and as a team. And I mean, because I can only tell the truth, I can't tell you how the story is going to end, but I can tell you that they're in a really good place, and probably better than most companies, as they're not just responding to this crisis, they're actually creating the future they want versus actually trying to guess what the future will be like.
Oh, that's fantastic. I'd like to read that story when it's done.
You got it. I'll make a note to myself.
Do you feel like we're in a period of time where we actually have the most shared reality that maybe has ever existed, or not?
And you're talking publicly?
That false thinking. Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, uh, okay, we'll just keep being authentic. Okay, Ali, should we do that? Okay,
Yeah.
we'll keep being authentic. Actually, no, it's actually the opposite. I mean,
Okay.
and not just in the US, but it's in countries around the world. An event can occur, and because of our biases, 45% of the population will think it's a good thing, and 45 will think it's a bad thing. And it's the same event. And so my answer is no, we're not functioning from a shared reality, which makes it very, very difficult to collaborate.
It does. Okay, so maybe that's my positive, passionate, wishful thinking of we're all experiencing the same thing. We're in it together, right? We keep on saying we are.
Yes, yes. Someone once told me, I thought this was really wise. We're in the storm together, but right now we're all in different boats, so we're experiencing it differently. Which there's some sadness for me in that, because we are about, of course, unity and a shared focus, if you will. But it's why the listeners to your podcast are so important in our world, that we must continue to focus forward and do what we can, because the alternative doesn't appeal to me.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that one. Do you have a kind of number one takeaway that you'd like to pass on to our people on this podcast today? Kind of a final thought?
Yeah, pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Leadership matters, but only teams deliver. And we put a lot of emphasis on leadership development. There are still far too many of us that keep thinking about leadership as it's very me-oriented. And as leaders, if we just a little bit more understand that it's the collective and how do I bring the best out of more of us, then in fact, I've been an effective leader.
Yeah. That is a great closing tip. Craig, I first off very much appreciate your time this afternoon. And I want to make sure that people know how to connect with you and or follow you. What would be the preferred channel for that?
Oh, thank you. Really, any of the common means. So you can find our work at Verus Global, VERUS Global.com. Very active on LinkedIn. We have a new video cast. It's called Connected Focus. It's free, comes out every other week, 5 minutes video on this type of discussion. We also have a free collaborative leaders huddle that's every other week. We now have hundreds of people tuning in from around the world for discussions like this. It'd be fun. Maybe we'll have you around, Ali. That'd be fun to have you as a part of that someday.
I would love to participate in that. So that's a collaborative huddle every other week.
Collaborative leaders huddle, yeah.
Yeah, that is fantastic. My closing thoughts are that it's just so important that the work that you're doing, and I hope that, I don't know that you have another book coming out. Do you have anything you're working on writing right now? Do you?
We're in the early stages, so yes, we do. As in the collaborative leadership capabilities and what's required, and yeah, I'll just leave it there. It's a big undertaking.
Okay, well, fantastic. Well, I look forward to seeing what that looks like as it does, and I would love to be part of your collaborative huddle. That would be fantastic. So,
Ali, thanks for having me on. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, and we'll talk again soon.